Nothing's easy, dude.
Welcome, everybody, to Soccer Wise live post-game show here. David Goss and Tom Bogert with you. Tom finally showed up for a post-game show just to curse the U.S. men's national team and make sure that they were out for all of Copa America. We have been doing this all tournament. I think I didn't play the song live. I think I only played it to preview. So here, I'll give you guys a little bit more of the music.
I didn't hear anything.
Well, either way, this is Soccer Wise live post-game show for the USMNT. We've been doing this every single game. Tom finally arrived just to make sure that the US would lose, and we are going to be with you as long as you'd like here on YouTube and Twitch. And for anyone listening in post, thanks for listening. And we, of course, will have your Tuesday MLS show coming up 2 p.m. Eastern time. We've got Wednesday NWSL, and then we are off for July 4th here in the U.S. Of course, the U.S. losing 1-0 to Uruguay, being eliminated in the group stage of the Copa America. Fox flashed this statistic. This was the 20th major international tournament hosted in the United States. The U.S. had gotten out of their group in all 19 competitions before. The bulk of that is Gold Cups. You've got a 1994 World Cup in there, and you've got, 2016 Copa America Centenario. I think that's really all you're talking about. I don't know, maybe they count some of the weird things they played going into the 2002 World Cup or whatever. So the U.S. is out. We talked a little bit about what could happen and how it could go down. There was a moment where Panama was tied with Bolivia at 1-1, and the U.S. was tied with Uruguay at 0-0. That was about 45 seconds of time. Then the U.S. concedes off of the free kick. And that is all she wrote for the U.S. 3 goals in 3 games, 2 of them against Bolivia in the group stage. So alongside Mexico, they are eliminated. Jamaica as well in CONCACAF. Canada, the lone CONCACAF team that moves on. For now, Tom, initial thoughts. First of all, cheers. If we're going to be doing 11 p.m. post-live shows after teams lose, hey, Tom, if anyone will pay us, you can show whatever you want.
Well, that's the thing. We're giving it away for free. Yeah. So, where do you want to go, Dave? I think.
Where are you right now? Let's start there.
Look, the most important conversation coming out of this is the manager's future. And after not getting out of the group stage at the Copa America, Greg Berhalter cannot continue as manager of this federation, of this national team. You can throw me the context, and it's fair. You can say he didn't tell Tim Weah go punch another player and get a red card against Panama. You can say the refereeing was atrocious tonight, as it was. I don't care. I don't want to hear about performance. I don't want to hear about refereeing. I don't want to hear about individual moments. I don't want to hear about excuses. Guess what? At the highest level, it's about results. I don't need another press conference about how well they played when they lose 1-0 to Canada, or how they did this and that. Like, I'm sick of all of the process talk. I'm sick of all of the moral victories or trying to spin it away to the XG battle rather than actual goals and stuff. We've gone too far, and I don't think that it's much deeper than, and I know it sounds like a caveman, but I don't know that it's much deeper than, did you get out of the group stage at the second premier international tournament that you're going to play, World Cup, Copa, World Cup? Did you get out of the group stage at the Copa America in a group that had Bolivia, the worst team at this tournament, and Panama, who's not exactly Brazil or Argentina? Did you get out? No. Thank you very much. New coach. It has to be.
I think most people are going to be on your side. I think I probably am at this point as well. The Tim Weah part is clear of, like, it's a group stage. There's not a lot of margin for error, but you kind of got the result tonight. Like, Panama at a 3-1 win was what you were hoping for. Like, if you win this game against Uruguay, you're through at that point. That was a prayer and a chance coming into this game, and you don't score a single goal in this game. And I watched this game, and I sent you my notes of, like, everything that I kind of was digging into and trying to find in all these things. And one of the really tough parts about the U.S. is that it's unclear what their pressing triggers are. And think about all the moments where Uruguay was able to play out, or Uruguay was able to start to progress the ball up the field. It was unclear which way the U.S. wanted to cut the field, who they wanted to press, and then except for a couple of moments where they pressed really, really high and won it back, they don't really know what they want to do once they get it back. And then on the flip side, there's a few moments where Uruguay extends their pressure, and you're like, finally, great, now we have space to play into, and Matt Turner launches it out of bounds. Or Chris Richards just plays back across the field because he's nervous about what's coming at him. And we'll talk about a bunch of the individuals as well, because this, as much as we can talk about the manager, because it's the one thing you're allowed to change in international soccer, it is not purely on him over the course of this week, and it hasn't been purely on him over the course of this time that he's been with this group. I think very few players stepped up over the course of this tournament, and I think some of the guys that I had question marks about parts of their game, I think were exposed over the parts of this competition. But you are right in that at some point the buck has to stop somewhere. And the exciting part about the opening 20 minutes of this game was like they played on the front foot. They played aggressive. Mm-hmm. They played to win. They played like they had nothing to lose because they kind of didn't. And you don't see that often enough. And you don't get enough of that. You didn't get... I think it's tough to say like, oh, you got to open up and attack at some point or push your lines higher, playing down a player against Panama for all that time. But like you didn't see it at all. You didn't see it at any moment where you're playing higher up the field and taking risks and being progressive. And I think that's the part that's really frustrating. So you add that into the lack of results. They have never beaten a top 20 team under Greg Berhalter except for Mexico. And then you're at a loss. There is really nothing you're leaning back on except for the fact that these players keep saying that this is who they want to play for. And I don't know that these players are mature enough to know that.
And then look, like that's important feedback, and that's part of it, but it's only one part of it, as you say. And again, I think before we even dive in further to the game itself, and there's a lot of merit, and that'll be interesting, I still think that the focus is on the macro. And a couple of things that I want to say is one, you brought up that stat about how poorly they've done against top 15 or top 20 teams in FIFA. This game model has been set up to dominate CONCACAF. And again, that is good, except that should not be the barometer. That should not be the goal. That should not be the ambition. I think that this team, these crop of players, are at their best in like a transition-based game model, in a high-energy game model. Christian Pulisic is the best version of himself in the open field. And I thought we saw that a few times tonight, so I will give Greg Berhalter credit that putting Pulisic on the right and Rain on the left, which is something that Matt Doyle has been calling for this for like 2 years. That was a wrinkle that worked because Uruguay's left back was attacking a lot, and Pulisic was clearly told, just fill in that space. Don't track him back. Fill in the space behind him. Gio Reyna's pulling in, and Gio Reyna's trying to find him to Pulisic. The outball is always to Pulisic. So I think that was a good wrinkle. But they don't really ever play like that. So the game model is built to beat CONCACAF teams, and they've been really good at that, and that's an achievement. Ironically, it's the game against Panama that essentially is going to cost Greg Berhalter's job if he is fired. And that's a CONCACAF team at this tournament. So even with all of that said, at a bigger tournament, it's a CONCACAF team that might do them in. The second point I want to bring up, our players have a ton of potential. There is a lot of talent here. This needs to be checked. It's not as good as I think our perception is. Look at Uruguay tonight, too. And it's fun, like some casuals that are in my life, and I don't blame them for looking, oh, like Uruguay, are they good? Like, right? Like, but it's like, oh, aren't we like 45, 50. Like, I know Uruguay's a little bit better, but aren't we like, if we played this game 10 times, we'd win like 3 or 4, right? And I was like, I really don't think so. Our best players, so Pulisic, key player from Milan. That's fantastic. McKennie has been a key player for Juventus, but more of like a role player, and he might leave. Gio Reyna, probably our second most talented player, was benched by 2 different teams this season and played a grand total of like under 600 league minutes. Tim Weah is a role-playing wingback for Juventus. Tyler Adams plays for Bournemouth. Tim Ream plays for Fulham. Jedi Robinson, Fulham. Matt Turner, bench. Like, you go on down the starting 11, it's strong for, I guess, potential. And these are a lot of young players, and they can continue growing. But right now, we're not talking about potential. We're talking about what they are now. You look at that Uruguay team, starters for Liverpool, Barcelona, Real Madrid, PSG, Napoli. And not just starters, every game starters. And that's the difference. And again, first and foremost, like this, I believe that this run should cost Greg Berhalter his job. But I also think we got to stop looking at this as potential and what this team could be, and take the reality of what it is. We're not better than Uruguay. We're not better than Colombia. We're not better than these second-tier teams that we want to talk about breaking into the top 10. We're not in that next tier. We're not to the same level of these teams.
I agree with you. I slightly disagree with you in the style that it's just built to beat CONCACAF. I think it's built to keep games close, and then your talent overwhelms, or your talent has that moment. And like it's all very safe. It's all about playing in the middle block. It's all about being clean in your lines in a defensive block. It's all about not overextending your lines and then winning enough 50-50 moments or having moments of brilliance. And then I think that leans into what you just said, which is like on the field today, if you were going to say who's got the individual that's going to make a moment happen outside of Christian Pulisic, the next 7 players you name are Uruguay players that the team's probably not good enough to be that. And if you acknowledge that it's not good enough to be that, then you start to lean in and say, okay, well, what are the different mechanisms we can use to make this team better? For example, we have young athletic players. Why? Maybe we should be a high pressing team. Maybe we should try and trap the ball into one half of the field and constantly be going vertical in those moments. Like, those are things where you help players life be easier because they don't have to figure it out. And there is so much of it figuring out. And I thought today was telling in that Tim Ream looked lost in possession the entire game. And you're talking about someone who's 35 and has been a starter in the Premier League for 7 years or so. And it's like, if he doesn't understand what the plan is and the build outs are when he's in possession in supernatural spots on his left foot towards the left side of the field, then it doesn't feel like there's enough there. And then you start to see players get lost because they start trying to figure it out. And then once they went down, they threw 17 center forwards on the field and it made no sense. And they lost every header anyway. So I don't know what the point of that was, but fine. So I slightly disagree with you in that way, but I agree with you overall in like it is very stodgy. It's very structured. It's very safe. All of the things that happen. And it is for us, and we are an MLS show heavily. It is a lot like what you saw Luchi Gonzalez's teams do. It's a lot like what you saw Nico Estevez's teams do. And you see players get lost in these moments and in this whole mindset, and they don't feel like aggressors, and they don't feel like they're there to make the game and win the game. They're there to not lose the game. And then you watch the World Cup and you say, it was enough to get the goal against Iran. It was enough to break through and get the goal against Wales. And that was it. Like, that's when you look now over this 3-year span coming out of World Cup qualifying and then through to now, those are your moments, right? That's all we're talking about as your peaks where you're losing to Germany in friendlies. You're putting up some strong performances. The 1-1 against Brazil, fine. Like, but again, the 1-1 against Brazil was mid-block, stayed in the game, get a free kick goal. Like, is that enough to say that there was something built in that?
That's a fair question, but I think that it's just about being more realistic about where this group is and where it is in the hierarchy of global soccer. If they tried to play, I don't know, take 60% possession or again, even high press Brazil, so that's not even what I'm necessarily calling for. It's I guess more chameleonic and more of relying on high pressing and in transition, not necessarily always high pressing, but that you can still find those moments to come forward. So that's where I see the state of the pool right now. That's where I just keep on coming back to the macro stuff and we can talk about those little moments. And yes, like that's not good enough, but dude, like, you think back to the early 2010s teams or the early 2000s teams, like the talent is probably better now, maybe better now, but I just think it's a completely different. We're not playing up to the potential of the talent or the potential of the potential to even sound a little dumber. I was a little bit thrown off by your use of stodgy. I thought that was excellent. And just as I'm yelling into the microphone, I just want to say well done to you, David Goss.
So shout out to the comment section so far. Ben Wright, who does a great job covering Nashville SC. You should follow him. Says help. Hey guys, please help. I'm dying inside. We're getting a bit of that from some U.S. fans. We've got some, I'd say, trolley statements. One being we're not better than Panama, which right now is true. So that's fair. I think one from some guy named Matt Doyle who says the two teams with more MLS players today won both their games. What does that tell you? Because Kiki Olivera played for this Uruguay team. And of course, Panama, a loaded group with some MLS players in there as well. So don't worry, the trolls are out in our own way. Eric Gonzalez says game needed more Dax McCarty. A lot of question marks, though, about what would come next and like what this team is and where it would go. You texted me during the game and you said, if you're going to hire an American to coach this team, which for a lot of nations, you often lean into a coach from that country. So it's not like uncommon. It's not a necessity, but it's not uncommon. Who would you pick? And we both said Jesse Marsh, who is currently unavailable and seems like probably won't work for U.S. soccer again anytime soon based off his experiences of trying to get this job originally. And outside of that, there weren't a ton of names that made any more sense. I think, by the way, and everyone can get as mad as they want about this, I think Greg Berhalter is a genius when it comes to soccer. I think when you sit around and hear him talk the game, he understands the game at a super high level. He understands the game from so many points of view around the world. I don't believe in having managers for a second cycle in national teams. I just think you only touch the players so often, and there's only so much you can do. And I think once you've done it in a cycle, there isn't really much to add after that because you can't be tactically perfect at the international level. You will never get there. Like, that's just not a reality. So you can get to your 80% and you can do your rah-rah and you bring in this motivational speaker and you show this video and you tell this story and you've got this little nugget. And like, I think after 4 years, you've kind of done them all. And so I've always felt that way. And I think that's part of it. And so you could convince me on like a fresh voice, but you're in a danger zone now. Like, there's no other move after this. If you bring in a new manager, that is your manager for the 2026 hosted World Cup. That is your best opportunity to win a World Cup ever. And is this one chance to change the perception of the team and the sport and all these things that we're talking about. And that's it. And the last interview process took, 12 months, and they netted out on the same guy who does it now. So I don't know where you go from here if that's really the situation you decide to lean into.
Yeah, a couple things off that. First, I want to talk about that process as well. I was very frustrated by that. I think a lot of fans were. I think a lot of people were asking questions about why does it take this long to name a new manager, and particularly to name the one that was already in charge of the team. It does not need to take that long. I think that a lot of these processes and talking about how complex and how many people we called and how many things we did and all the questions we asked, there's an overload of data. And I think that we're overthinking some of these things. I think that it has more to do with perception of look at all the things we tried than like if you asked interview candidates in, how many doors are in the city of Chicago, just to test their processing and how they do thinking on their feet, whatever. This is a real thing that consulting agencies do, by the way. Does that matter in this process? Like, did you change your mind on who the final candidate was going to be? A lot of this can come down to contract talks too. Like, it should never take that long to identify and name a manager. My biggest fear coming out of this right now is that even if they do decide to let go of Greg Berhalter, they're going to be like, let's take a step back. Let's analyze the tournament completely. And 6 or 8 weeks is going to pass and there won't be a decision yet. And I think that is catastrophic and it will make us look like an absolute joke. The forward-looking part is I'm not exactly sure who the next manager is. And I sound hypocritical and I'm making fun of myself for framing it all like that. There is no obvious American candidate now. Is it Pellegrino Matarazzo? David Wagner? Like, are those the best two? Like, Jim Curtin's stock has taken a big hit. You kind of look at MLS, like there isn't an obvious next American manager kind of breaking through. There isn't an obvious American manager like Jesse Marsh was when he was available before he took the Canada job. There is no obvious solution. And I'm not binary on it has to be an American. That's my preference. But just like all these other things, like my preference generally, Goss, is the same as yours, is shouldn't be a second cycle for national team coaches, but I'm not binary with that. Like, I think that there's a lot of context that comes with it. So all of these things aren't non-negotiables. What is a non-negotiable for me is that these decisions should not take that long. It really should not. Yeah,
and I think the stressor is like, if you believe somewhat like clearly we do about the cycles, also like you're going into a World Cup, that's the moment. Like, a lot of that work should have been done already. Like, you should have gone to Qatar, and like, it's not an offense to Greg Berhalter. It's like, well, we're doing our due diligence. Like, this is our job, right? NBA free agency started today. Every team trying to re-sign a guy should have the next 17 guys already ready because, like, that's just the reality of the world. It's not even professional sports. Like, if I quit my job, obviously I don't have one because I do this with you.
Don't quit this show. Are you kidding me? We just started.
For sure. But if I quit my job, like you have to be prepared for that. And I have to be interviewing. Like we're all doing the same thing at the same time. So I agree with you. I think that part's really frustrating. We got the questions about why does it have to be an American in the chat? It doesn't. Also,
I literally said that.
Yeah, it also can be someone who is from the soccer culture in this area. Wilfred Nance is a name that I mentioned because I'm a nerd, and it is probably too inside baseball to give him that opportunity. The belief was Jurgen Klinsmann was that person. Jurgen Klinsmann lived in California and had lived in the U.S. for a really long time, and the hope was that he would sort of be that bridge and in between. It turns out Jurgen Klinsmann's insane, so like that part made it really difficult for him to be the national team manager. But you can just ask South Korea, and they can sort of verify for it. So we don't have those clear names. I mean, you mentioned the two Americans who are coaching in Europe, and like I guess that makes them qualified. And like Pellegrino Materazzi's done some really good things in a good league. David Wagner, I would argue, has done okay things in sort of comparable situations to other American setups, and I don't even know how much he's operated here in the soccer world. Like there's a lot to go through being a national team manager, which is dealing with local media, dealing with a lot of the soccer entities in the world. Like it's a political position and a CEO position as much as it is a coach. It's less so for the US now because Matt Crocker should be doing a lot of that. Higuchi Onyewu should be doing a lot of that. So you could argue then it's like now you can go really lean into a coach, but it is like most of what Greg Berhalter does is visiting other teams so that he can get them to send players when he needs to. So if you don't know already the 29 teams that exist here in Major League Soccer where the bulk of your players play, that just makes your job a little bit harder, but it's not impossible. And like you can hire assistants and do that if you want to. I just still, I mean, I said 2 years ago, Ricardo Gareca, he obviously now has done the Chile job. I thought that's one where it's like an interesting coach who be also kind of the same of like just give guys belief and make them play really hard. Yeah. And that I think is still 95% of being a national team manager.
And we're talking about names, right? Like, and in the chat, and I saw this in the last cycle as well of why not Jurgen Klopp? What about Jose Mourinho? What about this? And like that sounds lovely in theory. Yeah, if we could convince them to take the job, obviously. Greg Berhalter in 2022 made $1.4 million with potential with bonuses up to 2.3. So let's just call it 2.3. You know what Jurgen Klopp made at Liverpool? Like 15 million euros a year. You know what Jose Mourinho's making in Turkey? $11 million a year. You know, somebody put Ralph Rangnick in the chat. Why in the hell would he leave Austria for this? Also, why would Austria let him leave? He got to the knockout stage of the Euros, auto-extended his contract. You would have to pay at least, I believe when Bayern were trying to get Ralph Rangnick, the reports were like a $3 million compensation to Austria. That's more than Greg Berhalter's salary. And then you have to pay Ralph Rangnick, who's like the godfather of gegenpressing and all this stuff. I'm going to go ahead and assume that his salary asks aren't going to be, cheap. So, like, yeah, all of those names make sense, but this isn't a realistic word. Like, that's not something that they're going to do. And again, unless that, God love them, if one of these guys says, I love the United States so much, I'll take a 90% pay cut. Sure, let's do it. It's just not realistic.
When we're wrapping up, I'm going to read through my friend Matt Folger in the comments, who has named literally every fake name you could name, like Hans Baca, Peter Novak, and Chalice as potentials there. Nathan Hill says Peter Vermees will be available soon. Man, Sporting KC would get a huge favor if the U.S. went and got him. Sporting KC would be stoked. It would be a get out for them. I think it goes, though, to there are not obvious names. I don't know that Jose Mourinho is an obvious name. The guy burns down every building he's in. He gets a little bit of time period, and I do think there's a ton of value in when you are whoever it is, right? When Ricardo Pepi walks into a locker room and Jose Mourinho says, I believe in you, I think that has value to players. I think that inspires them. I think that pushes them. And as I said, I do think that is 80-90% of international soccer. And I think you've seen that from Greg Berhalter. I've said this a ton. Like I remember being in the tunnel before the 2015 Eastern Conference Championship between Toronto and Columbus and talking to Greg Berhalter, and it was 100% about tactics. And like, you can't bait him into a tactics conversation anymore. You can't ask him about it in press conferences. He doesn't talk about it. He talks about intensity. He talks about winning battles. He talks about he talks about all these things, which he has clearly identified are the few things you can control in international soccer in the time frame you have of like playing on the front foot and attacking and being aggressive. They just don't really then, when they're on the field, lean into a lot of these things. Let's talk about this for a minute. We haven't even broken down the game. I don't know how many people want us to. We can do it. I've got notes. We can go into it. But in the conversation you had,
do a running diary. Just read your notes, and that'll be it. That'll be good.
Well, that's what I've been doing on this show, by the way, for the last week, is these monologue episodes. If you want to listen to the weekend recap mailbag, it's an hour and 4 minutes from earlier today, and I did it solo, which is an absurd thing to do. The questions were amazing. How do you get in there? You subscribe to the Patreon, SoccerWise Patreon. You get into the Discord. You get to be a part of all of this. You get to sweat with us and die with us in all these big moments and enjoy the games and blah, blah, blah. And you get to be a part of the mailbag. In watching this game, though, in watching these moments and talking about like what can the U.S. do better and what can't they, there are a lot of flaws in this team. And like in your conversation about where team players start and all these things, if you want to build out of the back, you're building out of the back through Matt Turner, who's fine, and then you go to Joe Scally and Anthony Robinson, and neither of them want to be in possession, and neither of them are clean enough to be able to really pass between lines in dangerous moments. And when they get pressured, they panic, they turn back, and they play back. And like, you're already at a disadvantage. And when you win the ball high up the field, even like Tyler's not aggressive offensively, and like he is world class at the things he's world class at, and I'll use that term because I believe it. But then the holes in his game are massive, and you don't have complete players in these moments. And so you could talk about all the things you want to see this team do. A lot of it is they struggle to physically do a lot of those things. And so when you watch a game like this, where the U.S. has high possession early, high energy, doesn't really create chances, then, and a lot of this I think was after the injury that occurred, but to the U.S.'s credit, I thought they kept up a lot of their energy after that. I thought they reignited. When it's in the mid-block game and it's back and forth, there's just not a ton of cutting edge. And the cutting edge is not in individual moments, and it's not in ball progression quick enough to break a team down. And a lot of the ball progression not being quick enough is messy first touches, is poorly played passes, is Yunus Musa wins it back, first touch to Weston McKennie, and Weston McKennie clips a ball 7 yards over Yunus Musa's head that rolls out of bounds. And like, that's your repress. That's your counter press into an attacking phase. It no longer exists. And so there are all these things you can talk about, but like, there are major flaws throughout this team. And I think 1 through 6 is really the conversation you have where you say, this is a golden generation, the best team we've ever had. I think after that, it is a really tough spot to say, and especially once you have an injury. Once Serginho Dest goes down, and Joe Scally's your full-time starter, and Joe Scally pulls up, and now you're talking about Shaq Moore potentially coming on the field and playing, like, it drops off really, really quickly.
Yeah, again, I'd push back again, even at the top 6. Again, I think Gio Reyna is an extremely talented player. I think his best moments of the past year has been with the national team because he's not playing at his club. Matt Turner is not playing at his club. Again, you go on down the list, and again, I understand your point of 1 through 6 isn't maybe necessarily a problem, but like, we call it a golden generation, and 2 of the players are playing key roles for really good clubs. 3, I mean, Jedi Robinson, I think it'd be fair to add him into this, but like, that's a left back playing for Fulham. Again, Uruguay has starters for Barcelona, Real Madrid, Liverpool, PSG, and Napoli. It's different levels, man. It's simple as that.
I want to throw one more thing out there, which is because the Matt Beasler comments have obviously been big this week, which I think he's already walked back. I don't know how you walk that back. Like, you said a thing. It's fine. It's fine, right? Just say your thing and move on. Matt Beasler.
I didn't know I was getting aggregated. Matt Beasler.
Yeah, right.
If you get it now, you get it.
Matt Beasler was 27 at the 2014 World Cup. Didn't have a ton of international experience. On this team, let me just skim it real quick. There are 1, 2, 3 field players that are 27 and above on this team. So like, Matt Beasler can talk about playing hard and trying and having their roles. Cool. Clint Dempsey scored in the first 3 minutes. You guys sat behind it. for 97. Unreal second half against Portugal. I was in the building. It's one of the great 45 minutes in U.S. men's soccer history. And then Germany showed up in a hurricane, decided not to play, and you got through to the group stage where Tim Howard played great and you lost. So international soccer, we are talking about moments. I mean, Timothy Weah doesn't get that red card. We're probably talking about a team that got out of this group, and like those are moments. This is still one of the youngest international teams in the world. And so one of the things that frustrates me, and we have some people on Twitter who are like, 11 MLS players get out of this group. Yeah, because all 11 of those MLS players are probably in their prime or like post-prime. Like the team we would put together in this scenario would be all players who are experienced and at the peak of their game and all these things. That doesn't mean that Weston McKennie's not experienced, but he is the 10th or 11th most important player on the field most of the times he steps on the field for Juve. And so he can pop up and have his dangerous moment and create a chance. And a lot of what he does, right, is being the extra runner and like seeing the gaps and seeing the opening and reading the play and getting there. But he's the extra runner because like you're not going to help off the other guys. If Weston McKennie's flashing by you, like you're not going to leave the world-class player that you're already marking, which gets tougher and tougher as you talk about Juve, but fine. And like get right now and then get into that space. And like that is a part for the US that you can't accelerate. You can't accelerate that these players are not at their peak. I think what we see with Pulisic right now is like Pulisic is finally at a spot where he's played pro in Europe for 7 years. And he has found a club that relies on him and he's relied on every single week. And he has elevated his game to that. And like he has figured that out. Not all of these players are in that situation. And so they come to play with the US and that's a new role for them. And like, even when you talk about, you want to say like compare teams and whatever, look at some of the players on the field for Austria. Like they're the stars for Sturm Graz. They're the stars for RB Salzburg. They're the stars for Sparta Praha. Wherever they play, like that's their role, and then that's their role. They're not that great. They're not elite world-class players, but like that's the role they play. That's not the case with this U.S. group. And as much as we want to like get it moving quicker and do more and all this stuff, it still sits in that spot where you're talking about guys who are being asked to do things for the first time in their careers, and they're being asked to do it on this huge stage, and they're only around this 5 to 7 times a year.
Fair enough, but I mean, the obvious counter to that would be, so do you think Weston McKennie to FC Cincinnati be better for his career? Because that would be the role he's in. Or again, if you don't even want it to be the pyrotechnic, the type of conversation of MLS versus whatever, like, I don't know, let's say Weston McKennie went to Club Brugge, hypothetically. Obviously not a realistic thing, but where he'd be an essential player in a worse team in a worse league.
I said it when we brought it. I said it to the aggregators when we brought it up in the Cincy combo. I do think it might develop different players in different ways. I think there are some players who need to be in an environment where they need to fight for their starting spot. And then there are some players who need to be in an environment where every day everyone else is watching them. And if they train poorly, the team trains poorly, and then the coach gets fired, and like that's the whole scenario that they are on. I think that's a different life experience. And
I agree.
Weston McKennie wouldn't be one that I would say doesn't need that. Like consistency and having the game on your shoulders a ton is one of those things. I will say this for Weston McKennie in this tournament. I thought he struggled in possession. I thought he struggled in a lot of ways where he could be elite. I thought he worked pretty hard. Like he was upping the tempo when he could. He won a ton of tackles in midfield, especially when Tyler wasn't on the field. Like he's chasing back and creating plays. So that's a credit to him. That has nothing to do with this conversation. His name came up, so I want to say it. I don't know. What would be your response?
Sorry, I was trying to get quotes ready for Berhalter's press conference to pull up, and I found an interesting one that we can go to next, but I'm going to need you to reset that for me. Well, you asked me a question, and then I just admitted I wasn't.
What's your response to your question? Do you think Weston McKennie becomes better for playing at FC Cincinnati?
No, wow. I asked myself a question. I wasn't even listening to myself. That's tough. You hate to see that. Don't play back that clip. No, I don't think so because, like, again, I see that argument, and I was hinting at it and trying to play devil's advocate, play both sides on, hey, let's talk out the Weston McKennie Cincy stuff. I see there is a value in that. There absolutely is. But I think that there's more of a value for a player like Weston McKennie in going to the Premier League again. Or, not staying at Juventus anymore because that's not on the table. But they had contract talks about maybe. So I think that's more valuable for a player like that, particularly at the player at this time of his career. Maybe when he's 28, 29, I could be talked differently into it. But I think right now, that's where I stand. And then again, the question I think that's really gonna set things off. And I don't blame Berhalter's answer for this, but as for Jeff Carlisle, who's at the press conference, Berhalter was asked if he feels like he's the right man and the right voice to lead the U.S. national team into the 2026 World Cup. Berhalter says yes.
Yeah. What else is he gonna say?
Well, yeah, exactly. But I think that's going to get picked up pretty heavily.
It is. I mean, there is a world in which he can step into that space and say, like, this isn't working, and then walks away. I'll just be straight up. From a money point of view, you're just not going to do that.
Exactly.
Like, you're just going to get
that
fired.
was where my mind went first.
Yeah, and get paid out for your contract. And to be clear, there are some pretty smart, for everyone who's like, oh, it's a meme, blah, blah, blah. When he does leave, he's going to get a really good job from someone who knows a lot about soccer, and you're all going to think it's ridiculous. And like, it has happened already where the offers he has gotten are from legitimate. It's not just like, oh, it's like in the US soccer sphere and like everyone's friends and all of that. Like, it's from people outside of that who think he's a very good coach. And I think when offered it, he wanted the opportunity to coach the US at a World Cup at home. Like, that was a thing you're not going to turn down for anyone in this conversation, because for the most part, all of these people feel very strongly about this program, this team, this group, right? You are talking, when you bring up the Jesse Marshes and the Peter Vermeeses and the Greg Vannies and all these people, like, for most of them, the U.S. soccer national team was actually the biggest part of their careers, and they feel very strongly about what it can mean going forward, where now you're starting to see the next generation of people who are like in MLS, for example. I talked to a bunch of MLS people who are like, why do I care? Why is the national team my problem? Like, you talk about young players in academies being like, oh, who are they eligible for? Like, and they're like, I don't really care as long as we can sell them off the back of a performance for one of the teams. Like, we had this whole debate when Atlanta wouldn't release players for the Olympic qualifying a few years back, right? Like, it wasn't their problem. Their problem was to win games and be competitive. That is starting to shift and starting to change. But for a lot of these people, like, this is the dream scenario. This is the dream job, all of those things. Hence, I think why you're going to see a Greg Berhalter say something like that. There is not an obvious name, by the way, on the bench that you'd say, oh, for example, Jill Ellis took over for Pia Sundhag and then became the coach for the team. And maybe she wasn't the obvious name at the time. I can't really remember back. Successful college soccer coach, whatever. There's not someone like that. And all of the Nashville fans are in our comments right now being like, get BJ Callahan out of here and get him to Nashville. So they're hoping that it's not him. But again,
soon,
I think
very soon.
I think it's very clear that there's not one simple name. And like, if they have to do this, then they're going to have to go in and do this. This is going to take a little bit of time to go find the next person and figure it out going forward. And the time is not time is not really a luxury that this program has right now. The rumors, by the way, today are that Jaime Lozano is going to keep his job for Mexico, which I am shocked by.
Yeah, that's very shocking. I don't know. Maybe part of it, like, I wonder if he came to the Federation before the tournament and was, because they made a whole thing about taking a younger squad and trying to move into the next generation, and like even leaving behind somebody like Chucky Lozano, who's in his late 20s. And again, hasn't quite lived up to the hype I think that they wanted, but like, he's still pretty clearly one of the Mexico's best 23, 26 players. So maybe there was part of it. Okay, you need to give me long-term security if I'm going to do this. I'm going to call in Memo Ochoa and Raul Jimenez and whoever else. So I don't know what went on there, but to your point, I'm absolutely shocked as well.
We haven't really talked the game that much. You want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah.
So U.S. comes out on the front foot. They need to win to go through. They come out the opening 20 minutes. I think it's the best 20 minutes they've played the entire tournament so far. A couple half chances, nothing super clear. You've got Pulisic on the right and Reyna on the left, which I think was the one real change. Musa gets inserted to the starting lineup for the first time. The back five remains the same. Tyler's clearly 90 minutes match fit, so it kind of takes that question off the board. What did you make of the decisions of how they replaced Weah? And I know you talked about Pulisic on the right side, but how they set up.
Yeah, I thought it made sense. That was my assumption going in. I mean, other than just I prefer Pulisic on the right, particularly in a game like this. my assumption was that we just haven't seen Berhalter invert Reyna and Pulisic, so I didn't think it was going to happen. So I like that change. But everything else, I thought was what it was going to be. Like, Berhalter's not dumb. He knows that this could have been him coaching for his job. In these situations, back against the wall, I think you go with the guys you trust. You go with the guys that, again, the first two games, this starting 11, essentially, again, with Weah coming out. So I'm not surprised that there wasn't wholesale changes. I'm not surprised that Haji Wright didn't all of a sudden get a look in this game. I'm not surprised that they didn't change the system or whatever, right? Like, so for me, I thought that was pretty straightforward. What I really liked at the beginning of the game was the U.S., I think, not just matched Uruguay's intensity, but I think they surpassed it a little bit at first. It seemed like Uruguay was struggling a little bit at the beginning of the game, and they kept on bringing up the stat on the broadcast of Uruguay has absolutely blitzed teams in the first two games of this tournament. Again, against opponents that they should be dominating of Panama and Bolivia. I'm sitting here talking over and over again about how good I think this Uruguay team is. But still, they've been blitzing teams at the beginning of these games. And I thought the United States was the better team. Not by much, but I thought they were the better team in the first 20 minutes. The XG isn't going to tell you that because I think their two biggest chances were crosses that were gobbled up by the goalkeeper. You don't get expected goals for that. And again, not that the XG battle is the be-all, end-all, but I thought that the performance was really strong early in the game. The intensity, the fight, the willingness, the trying to get the crowd into it. I loved all of that. Didn't love that they weren't creating a ton, of course. Yeah. But, 20 minutes in, I was like, all right, they're playing very well. That's what I thought. And then, again, you look at the numbers at halftime and you question that. But first view, that's where I was at.
We have a comment in the comments who say, should this not have been the plan A? When you look at this team, you mentioned liking Pulisic on the right. Should this not have been plan A? Reyna a little bit higher, Musa in midfield.
I agree. And with just the way that it fits, too. Our attacking fullback without Dest, it's Jedi Robinson. It's on the left side. So you want the player on the left to be the one that's tucking in, that's playing in that half space of a little bit wider kind of number 10, more of a playmaker than a direct winger. So I thought this made a lot of sense. This is probably how it should have been. So you let Robinson overlap, and then Scally's the one that stays home a little bit more on the right, and Pulisic's providing the width on the right. So yes, that's how I do believe that's how it should have been.
I'll disagree. I thought Reyna was lost until we throw everyone on, and he then came inside and was playing center mid by himself because I don't really know who was playing where. I thought Reyna was invisible most of the game, and that's the only drawback of this. And you could say you want way out on the left, fine, but that's the drawback of this setup is for Dortmund, when they have a ton of possession and they're playing higher, then Reyna as a quote-unquote winger is just one of the three attackers. But with the way the U.S. was stretched wide, he was never really connected, and the things that Jedi wants to put his head down, he wants to get a cross off. That's 90% of what he's going to do. There is not much interchange there, and so I think Reyna got lost throughout the game. I think Musa should be on the field because I like players who are press resistant and I like players who want possession. And people can complain as many times as they want about Darlington Nagbe not being goal dangerous and not trying to create chances. I play with 11 of them, so I'm the wrong person for this combo. But I said it off the back of the last game. I thought Johnny coming on after the red card to add to midfield in place of, Weah and try and make things a little bit harder to play through. I thought that was a mistake. I thought that should have been Musa, because if it is Musa, there's a chance that you can relieve pressure more often. And maybe at that point, after he relieves pressure and finds your first option, then maybe there is some attacking opportunities throughout that game. We saw Chile have a little bit against Canada, not a ton. Most of it was we need to score and go forward, which the U.S. sitting on a 1-1 probably wasn't going to do in that game. If they draw that game, that would have been the result they wanted. So it's a different scenario slightly, but I thought Musa should have been put in that game. I thought in this game, he wasn't great, but he still showed why he needs to be on the field in the balance between Weston McKennie going and doing the things he does well and Tyler Adams going and doing the things he does well. There is not really a clean option for most of the players on the back line to play in possession under pressure, and Musa is that player. And I thought when the U.S. did press, he was very good at reading the play, winning it back, and then he's the best player at making the first pass once they win it back. So I liked Musa being on the field. I liked Pulisic on the right side as well. He clearly found space. He pinned the fullback. That's a good opportunity for him, and like that made a ton of sense. Coming inside, I mean, I thought he was dangerous the first game too. Like, obviously it's Bolivia, but I think at this point he's playing at a level where like you're kind of going to get it from him wherever you put him, and so that part's pretty easy. Florian Balogun goes down with the injury after the big Uruguay injury, which you said how the U.S. started. Like, Uruguay was dying to kill the game, which is not what they're supposed to do under Bielsa, and it's not what they're supposed to do at this point at all. And like, they were trying to kill the momentum and kill the energy of the game. It unfortunately happens with a massive injury. As I said, I thought the U.S. did well to then actually pick things back up and push. And then Florian Balogun goes down. And it's tough because this is the best 2 games he's played of his U.S. career. And you're looking at a guy who's capable of a moment in a game now where we both agree the U.S. played well, and they finish with 0.56 XG, I think. And like, they're not goal dangerous, and he's capable of a moment like we saw against Panama that's different, and he seemed up for it. Like, he's physical, he's battling, he was getting the ball played into his feet in tough moments, and he was holding it. And that was not the case with Ricardo Pepi after. And I don't know that that was the right substitution, and that you could have pushed Pulisic or Reina to center forward, or you could have played Haji right out wide, whatever. There are other options there, but no matter what, once you lose Balogun, you're up against it if you think the 6 players are competitive, you're now pushing into the 12th and 13th pretty early in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the Pepe sub. I think it would be an absolute waste if you put Pulisic or Reina as center forward in a 4-3-3. I mean, you could talk me into it if you put like another more traditional striker next to them, but this would be a 4-3-3. I think that would have been super wasteful for either of those players. And so then it becomes Pepe or Josh Sargent, because Greg Berhalter before the tournament said he's viewing Haji Wright as a left winger. If Sargent was fit enough, I think it should have been him. But again, I would go back to, I completely understand the Pepe substitution, and you just kind of go like for like there, and it's not ideal because I think Balogun strikes more fear with more dynamic athleticism, more kind of off-ball running. Like you said, I just think that he's straight up been better than Ricardo Pepi over this little run here of the friendlies and then the Copa America. And I think that he was a better fit for this game. So can't control that injury. That's unfortunate, but I don't know. I think that we're overthinking it. If it was like, well, why didn't they change the formation?
Yeah.
Why didn't they do this? Like we said, that like I think that there are a lot good. And I know that this isn't about the game, but I'm remiss that I haven't added this yet. It's not all bad with Berhalter. There have been tremendous continental success in CONCACAF, and again, you can say we should expect that. Sure, maybe we should, but you still went out and did it. There has been excellent dual national recruiting. Balogun, Musa, Dest, got to go back to that. All these players. That comes from this environment that he's created. That comes from an environment where players are going to the federation and saying, we want Berhalter back. That's a real thing, and that's a real achievement. So, again, while we're being critical, while I started this show by saying there should be a change in manager, they should fire Greg Berhalter, it's not all bad. It's just time. So, all of that is to say that it doesn't really fit in the kind of the game breakdown that we're having, but like, I don't blame him for putting on Pepe for Balogun.
And I would say, and we will do this on Soccer Wise if this goes the way we think it's going to go. Greg Berhalter did the job. The problem is it's a second job now. Like, the first job was post-Cuba. Stabilize, establish a culture, make players want to be a part of this, create the next generation, right? Create the next hub that it's all built around. Like, you hear players from 2002 to 2014 talk about being part of the national team was like this club that you couldn't break into. And it was like impossible to be a part of the group. And everyone knows the group. Like, you can go listen to Charlie Davies and Josie Altidore and Mo Adu talk about the group. You can listen to Stu Holden. Like, they were all part of the culture of the group. And Landon Donovan was a huge part of it. And Tim Howard and all these. And like, you needed the next thing. And Greg Berhalter accomplished it all. They qualified for the World Cup. They got out of the group stage. They, reestablished the excitement around the team, It's just that was a different job. And so I think to your point about the dual nationals, like that's a major part of that, because I think a large part of the dual national recruit now, when we hear this about from Yunus Musa, is the players that play near them or with them doing it for the federation. It's Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams and Christian Pulisic being players playing in Champions League, talking to players playing in Champions League about doing this. So that is, I think, a really good point, and it's also one of the positives. And like, as you say, there are a lot of positives, and it's just the question of, did we all stay too long, and did we ruin it after that, and stuff like that. So that's that opening 25, 30 minutes. I thought Pepe was fine. He tried to lay it off a bunch in weird spots, and he actually was slightly successful. He didn't get the big chance. Like, he got them all against Bolivia. He didn't get them in this game, and I don't know how much more he was going to do, because I think then in that middle stretch of the game, it's like Uruguay starts to get possession. They start to play a little bit higher, and outside of moments where Pulisic touches the ball, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of creation. There's a ton of attack. Would you want to talk about the ref? We've got like 87 questions about the ref. The ref was bad.
Yeah,
like that happened.
Yeah. The segment of the yellow card being pulled out of his pocket, and then, oh no, we're gonna let a quick free kick go. Like, that should be enough that this referee shouldn't be on a major game for a while. And I don't say these things lightly. I don't like. Gosh, you know me, and I hope that you could vouch for me. I hate talking about refereeing. Because a lot of this, I think every single fan base, not just in soccer, I think every single fan base across all sports, it's the easiest thing to do. Refs sucked. They were against us. There was a conspiracy. It's not our fault. And that comes from you see things different ways when you're as a fan, right? It's like, so for me, I just don't have any juice to be like, yeah, okay, well, you've never gotten on the right end of a call. Okay. Like, I don't know how to kind of go with this. He was awful tonight. And again, that's not why they lost. It's not why they didn't get out of the group. But it's pretty factual. I know it's opinion, but it's pretty factual. I don't think that he had a great handle on the game. I am stunned by the more and more revelations that came about this referee. And by the way, things are going pretty bad if you become the topic of conversation and people are digging up your resume as a referee, within the first half. That happened really quickly. That he's 32 years old. Why was this his first Copa America game? Why is it not Bolivia, Panama, or the opening game, or the second? Why is his first Copa America game United States, Uruguay, to end the group stage?
Because they probably thought it was going to be two teams on 6 points that didn't care. That's like probably what happened. I didn't think about that until just now. He was clearly overwhelmed. There was a ton of, the two handballs that he didn't blow dead, and then the U.S. got out of the problem and then blew the play, were pretty brutal. The goal, I still can't really see it, and I thought Stu kind of went off in his own direction as a former U.S. player in a lot of that, of like demanding lines be straight and stuff. I think all that's fair. Like, clearly the technology is not at a high enough level. From the three.
Wait. You mean where they drew the line from the blimp camera angle? You don't think that was reliable?
Also,
shocked.
World feed experience. We barely ever see you see the line and then it's gone before you can actually look at what's happening.
The first screenshot, the player's knee, it showed red.
Yeah,
like as if he was offsides. And it was that's clear goal.
That's the part that I'm not sure on. Is it looks like the knee's offside. I think his feet are behind. Clearly his hand and arm are in front, which are not a goal-scoring part of your body. So that part's fine. And then the question is, who does the ball come off last? Is a defender or an attacker? If it's a defender, it's fine. If it's an attacker, obviously it's offside. And then is he past the line of Chris Richards' back foot? I'm not sure. The U.S. didn't score in this game. Like, you still come back to the ref could do whatever they wanted. The U.S. ties 0-0, they're out. They're tied 0-0. Do they score going forward late? No, they don't. Like, that's what ended up happening. And I think so that's the part where, as annoyed as I can be about refereeing, as annoyed as anyone can be about refereeing, you don't walk away from that game and saying it decided it. Because it didn't actually, even with those moments that killed momentum and the weird yellow card that let the play run on, whatever, it didn't actually really affect the play of like, oh, one team is fouling a ton. I actually thought Ivan Bartone affected the game more, besides the red card with Timothy Weah in the last game, of like letting Panamanian players pull Balogun down on the run with no yellow cards. And then when they became yellows later, they should have been second yellows for Reds, and they weren't. And like there was no real issue for Panama to kill attacks because they kind of knew they weren't going to get punished, and they didn't get punished. I didn't actually think that happened a ton in this game. There's some weird moments and whatever. And if the U.S. had snuck through, like, man, everyone is injured, and I'm pretty sure everyone is suspended on yellow cards. I don't know it because I didn't go through and check because it doesn't really matter. But I think all of that ends up coming back on the U.S. going forward. Some of the individual performances that stand out. Let's start in the back. I think Turner is fine. There's not really much he can do on the goal. He makes the initial save. I thought he was okay with his feet. The one thing I did like was he was really quick to restart play. Anytime they had a goal kick, by the time the camera cut back to play, they were into the attack, including the chance Pulisic tries to create for Pepe sort of midway through. I don't even know when. I was taking pictures of Michele Giannone behind the sideline holding his face. I have like 18 of them now. So shout out to Michele, the legend, who's like dying behind the goal for that one. But I thought at least Turner did that at a minimum, and otherwise it seemed like he was healthy enough to play and give them the performance they needed.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I think Anthony Robinson is always a standout. Just he's super consistent. I don't think they needed anything special in this game, but like again, every national team needs some players like this where you just get a consistent 7. He was up and down like always. He didn't have many bad moments in possession. Again, he didn't have any special attacking moments either, but I'll take that against Uruguay with everything. I thought they handled Darwin Nunez well enough. The field handled Darwin Nunez pretty well too. He went down a couple times with his foot getting stuck in the turf. But he wasn't really dangerous. Kiki, like Joe Scally, to his credit, like he played through an injury, and I thought that was very impressive as well. Kiki Oliveira wasn't really shaking him. So there was a lot of that was solid, man. It was just, again, when you get yourself in this situation, they needed more than solid, and obviously this wasn't the plan, and I don't know. I'm kind of running out because like as I'm complimenting the players, I'm like, yeah, but they needed to win, and okay, what did Joe Scally do going forward one single time?
Right.
Not like Jetty Robinson. I think he was good. Do I remember a key moment where he got into a good position and even messed up a cross, let alone, he played a good one. So all of these things, and it's doom and gloom, so it's difficult. That's where I keep coming back. And again, talking about and like Tim Ream on the botched refereeing call of the yellow card coming out. Tim Ream was the one who cleared the ball.
Yeah.
So like there was good moments within there, but I'm not walking away being like, 8 out of 10 performance, well done.
It is tough because you said it, like Darwin Nunez did not really appear in this game, and like, wow, on the one hand, credit to Chris Richards and Tim Ream for handling that. On the other side, I thought both were atrocious in possession. I thought they both really struggled. I thought Richards struggled with the speed of play, and then he seemed to be completely confused by the angles the pressure was coming at him. And the whole first half, he went back to Turner. Pretty much every time he touched the ball, he went back to Turner. And I've mentioned Ream's struggles passing out of that left center back spot, where he's normally very comfortable. And like those are moments where it's like, that's the CONCACAF setup, right? You have the entire back line stepped up to midfield. Ream is stepping into that left channel. Try to draw out a defender a little bit. What's the first pass? Like those are things we see in every Nations League semifinal. That's where it's tough to say that the U.S. looks so bewildered in those moments because they should have been comfortable in a lot of those spots.
Yeah, and that's a great point to go back to that. So again, while I'm giving kudos for some of these solid defensive performances, it was like one of the like handful of times that Chris Richards broke lines, they were moving forward. So if there was consistent being able to play a 15-yard pass forward and a little bit risky, like Chris Richards is probably feeling a little bit of heat from giving the ball away so many times in the first 2 games, that, hey, let's play a little conservative here. I think that informs the decision to go back to Turner. I think that plus, as you said, the angles of pressure that he seemed to struggle a little bit with. Again, the very few times that he did break lines, it was super advantageous for the national team. And again, like, I believe one of them was when Tyler Adams got the yellow card. It was a heavy touch from Adams. And again, like, he should have gotten the yellow card on that. He got his ankle stomped on. But, like, if he doesn't have a heavy touch there.
He comes through a ball that he doesn't get any on, where it's his long touch. And, like, the broadcast was furious about it. But, like, that's one of those moments where it's like Adams has put himself in a spot to get a yellow card,
Yeah.
right? And that was a bad that was a moment too where it's like he's breaking through off that layoff. That could be a dangerous moment.
And that's my point. That started with a really nice pass by Richards, if I'm 99% sure on that. And that's where the break could have happened. It ended up not happening, but it was like any time that Richards or Ream did make that pass through the midfield, or we were good at finding Reyna in like Reyna had a couple in the first half in particular, a couple good one-touch long switches to Pulisic direct. Yeah. Those were good moments. There just weren't enough of them.
Yeah. That was sort of the one outlet the U.S. had. Uruguay tried a little bit. They tried to hit those big crosses in transition moments to try and start the attack. And for the most part, again, the U.S. defended pretty well. Tyler did the things he does really well, killing transition moments by himself in moments he shouldn't. There's a play late in the game, which is like classic Tyler, which I get juiced about, where he wins the ball back like at the edge of the attacking third, clips it into the corner. Pulisic loses it. Pulisic's pressuring, and then Tyler cuts off the pass on the end line. He bypasses 3 American players to get there because he's like, I'll just play both positions. And it's like one of those absurd moments where, again, I say the things he's world class at. I use the word world class because he is that. Now, in saying that, I'd love to see that be the gameplay. Like, I'd love to see Tyler Adams leading pressure for 89 minutes. And like, if you lose that way, you lose that way. But like, it's so clearly the way when we've asked this question for 50 years, what is the American style? Like, now there's this system that's come into play where most teams live on, where it's like we create chances with our energy and our aggression off the ball, and that creates chances for us then in possession. And it feels so clear that you should lean completely into that. And Austria is really the one example of like you can build a national team. It took a little while. You're also now in that scenario drawing directly out of Red Bull players for the most, like all of that is pretty perfect. But you also don't have to qualify for this World Cup. So like the US, the thing that you had this opportunity with for these 4 years or 3 years in this cycle was you get an international cycle that very few coaches will ever get, where there are no stakes. And we're saying that in a time where, because of the performances, you're making these comments. But if there was that clear cycle and there was a clear, okay, the results weren't there, but the performances started to move in that direction, fine, from this tournament. And I don't believe that's the case. And the results weren't there on the top of it. And I think that part is really hard to deal with. On top of, we've got a bunch of questions, which is like, why are there not millionaires in the U.S. like in Canada who will just pay for the U.S. coach? I don't really know the mechanisms behind that, because U.S. soccer is a nonprofit. I guess you could donate money, and you could donate money to a cause. And if you wanted to do that, you could do that. I don't know a lot of rich people, but they normally don't give money away, but maybe you could find one. Maybe Drew Carey would do it.
Dude, no. If Drew Carey did that, if I was the Seattle Sounders front office and a fan, I'd be like, whoa. We could have bought a center forward. What are you doing?
Right. You could have bought Darwin Nunez instead of funding a U.S. coach. On top of that, we've got 87 more comments about Jurgen Klopp. Although I appreciate this one from Filmographer's podcast, who says, yes, Klopp has just been dreaming of the chance to coach the likes of Tyler Adams and Yunus Musa, which is a fair point. Although managing a team that's about to host a World Cup, I think, is the unique part that becomes really interesting. PH Swimmer asks, can this team learn how to deal with physicality? Panama and Uruguay both roughed this team up. Did you think that was a major issue, or is that something that stood out to you?
No. So that's something that I've gone to before, of like in some of these games, the intensity was not lacking today. I don't think intensity was lacking against Panama. Again, pretty intense by Tim Weah to get the red card, but like I don't think that's why they lost that game, and I don't think that's why they lost today.
Shout out to Hammer105 who says Bud Light needed today. Someone asked what I was drinking. It was a local bourbon, I believe, from Brooklyn. I was scrambling around because I'm out of beer, so I was trying to find something to pour
You're
before
so
this.
Classy, dude. It's sick.
I know. Well, listen, I dragged on the field today in co-ed. We were up 2-1. We lost 3-2, and I was limping over the finish line. I almost looked at the ref losing 3-2 and wanted to be like, come on, man, just call it. Like, just blow the whistle. I'm done. So I had to try and I got to try and lighten things up sometimes. The barbecue that I ate before the game probably was not the best pregame meal. And being in Kansas City, I do worry about the U.S. having done the same thing as me in all of that. Eric Nuchin, I'm just going to go with this comment, says, I think it's just that our golden generation of talent is only good enough to be a top 12 team in the world. I think that's not that far off. I would like to say for the 7,000th time, I don't believe this is a golden generation. I think the structure has been rebuilt, and I believe that the generations coming through are going to continue to be as talented. And I think Diego Luna and Jack McGlynn and Fidel Barajas and all of these players are really, really special and are going to be really special. The problem is it doesn't help you. When I talked about this team being all U27, like adding 2 more 20-year-olds in midfield is not going to make you much more competitive in 2026. It will going forward after that.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point, is that we continue to talk about potential, and I think that we got ahead of ourselves in talking about the potential of particularly after 2018, of, all right, miss the World Cup, huge embarrassment, huge disappointment. How do you cope? Hope. You look forward. Okay, look at all these young players we have. Oh, by 2022, they're all going to be world class. You play out the best case scenario for all of these careers. Same thing now with 2026. Like, these are a lot of young players and a lot of unproven players, or a lot of players that, again, I just don't want to keep repeating myself. I have earlier in the podcast, like you point to McKennie is he's closer to his prime or early prime, and he's 9th or 10th most important player when he starts for Juventus, right? Like that's different within the national team. And then we talk about some of the other players, and again, Reyna's got to be the poster boy for this, because he has the talent to be elite. He has the talent to join Pulisic. Balogun too. Balogun was awful with Monaco this year. Gio Reyna, as well documented, was awful with Dortmund and first, or maybe you can't even say awful because he never got the chance to be awful because he never played. So the other, like, looking at just pulling up the FIFA rankings, which is obviously not always correct in that USA are ahead of Colombia, Uruguay, Germany, whatever, right? Like, but just
boom,
the
that's
generalities,
a championship right there.
It's just going ahead of, like, these are like the tiers or whatever, and like in this tier, like, dude, like Uruguay doesn't have those players. Germany, like Japan's better than us, right? Like, there's Switzerland are 19th, and you even looked at them like, oh, like they lost, like, they're too old now, and like, boom, like there they go again against the knockout rounds. They just continue to do that. So I struggle to even get too micro about this now. Is that I think that the 10,000 view take is we're just not as good as I think the potential that we could be. And I think that we get lost potential versus talent, potential versus what are they right now? And that's been the argument in 22. Why are they bringing in these veterans? Joe Scally's going to be better than Yedlin and going to be better than Shaq. We're going to be whatever, right? Like, in 22. And Pepe's going to be better than all these players. Well, guess what? The 2022 World Cup, it doesn't matter what Pepe's going to be in 26. It matters what he is right now. And I think that we keep on getting lost in that.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And I think part of like what we just talked about with the cycle is like the Kuva won't happen again. 2022 won't happen again, where it's like you have to reset and lean on a bunch of kids to be the adults and be the veterans because you don't have a generation in the middle. That's the part that you've now worked against, but it doesn't mean the team's ready to hit and ready to roll right now. And like that is, to all of the comments we are getting here, a lot of the issue. We have one here that's CONCACAF is the problem. Go to CONMEBOL or UEFA. I don't think that even matters anymore. Like 175 teams get in the World Cup. Qualifying is going to be so minimal to what you do. I'm sure CONMEBOL and CONCACAF are going to run Copa Americas across the two regions over and over because of what UEFA is doing and solidifying and sort of creating a scenario in which their teams can't really play friendlies against other people for a ton of time because of Nations League schedule and everything they've done, as well as less window. So, yeah, I think all of that's fair. I think all of that's fine. I think it'd be nice to build up the region and make it better. And that actually is one of the things MLS is doing, which is a lot of the best players now on a lot of the national teams across CONCACAF are American born or raised, came out of MLS academies, and are playing for countries where their families are from, or the countries where they're born. And then a lot of other players are coming at a really young age. I mean, Venezuela is like 50% MLS players that came and played in. I would say if you look through this Venezuela team, there's like multiple players that played in USL or MLS Next Pro. Like that's sort of the setup for a lot of these countries. I think Colombia is going to be a part of that. I think Ecuador is going to be a part of that, but a lot of CONCACAF is as well. And I think you kind of have a responsibility to your region, but at the same time, I don't know that anyone else cares about this thing that I care about in this region and all those things and all of that going forward. This is Team X question. Says, can you expect to see the U.S. start playing in Copa consistently now moving forward? Not everyone, every other one would love to see that. Like, it just feels obvious. I mean, we're talking about Copa Lib sometimes. About like, it feels like we're on the verge of CONMEBOL and CONCACAF, or at least MLS and Liga MX finding a way to get clubs back in. If that's the case, then you've got national teams in 100%. Tom wants to talk about this.
Sure, whatever. Cool. I don't know. Like it's all these decisions are driven by money. They're not driven by like we're talking about it from a developmental sense. Yeah, that'd be great. But like let's see what the money shows and that's what it'll be. And like look at the field sizes. Look at if a stadium in this tournament could not have a regular size field, the 5 yards more, it shouldn't be a stadium. It shouldn't be a question. That should be something non-negotiable. But instead they like, look at when they played at Sporting Kansas City Stadium. They redrew the lines to make the field smaller to match all the other ones.
My Canadian friend was texting me about this, and I was like, there's no way. It's a soccer, like, they're playing on the field. What are you talking about? And then you could see the top of the box, inside the box, or above the box, whatever, on one side, I think in front of the blue cauldron.
So yeah, like, if it makes more sense, if they find a way to make more money by coming to America, and by the way, I'm sure that they will, but like that's why it's here right now. So yeah, maybe it will be, but like then they're gonna play on crap grass, or they're gonna do whatever, right? Or they're gonna be, I don't know, 75 games of qualifying just to make sure that they can sell tickets or they can sell TV rights or whatever. Who cares about the players? Who gives a shit about the quality of the games? Everything is just about people in suits maximizing profits. That's great. So who cares, right? Like. All these decisions are being made for monetary reasons, not for developmental reasons.
Matthew Brew says, would Lucho Acosta would he fix the U.S. men's national team? As you can see, if you're watching live on the bottom of our screen, we'll be live at 2 p.m. Eastern time, technically later today. On Tuesday, we will do our MLS show. Bradley Carnell was fired. We've got a ton to talk about. Thiago Almada seems to be on the move. So reminder, we've got that. And then Lori Lindsay's going to fill in for Jordan on our Wednesday show to talk NWSL. Amy Rodriguez was fired. We've got a lot to talk about there as well. So if you like questions like, does Lucho Acosta make the U.S. better, which no one else in the world wants to talk about except us, and maybe Weeby, who's probably texting us about it right now as Doyle floods the chat with a bunch of troll tweets from other people that he found super entertaining. You can join us there, or you can subscribe to the podcast. So go to SoccerWise, search SoccerWise or SoccerWise HQ anywhere on your socials. Subscribe to the Patreon as well, so you can get involved. You can jump into the Discord. You can get our depth charts as well, which are coming from MLS. We have them done for NWSL and U.S. Women's National Team. We're going to have to do ours for U.S. Men's National Team as well. My depth chart is like insane. It goes deep to the point of like players that should never be in a national team conversation. There are not a lot that a roster comes out and I can debate or really think about. Like, because it's one of the questions we've had in the chat, which is like, who brings more to this team? Who changes this group? The pool is not in a place where the debate is who's in, who's out. The pool is what it is, right? Like, there are not names that got left off this list. You brought up DeAndre Yedlin. Like, we're talking about all like backups in backup situations. We're talking about, is Sean Johnson the third goalkeeper or not? There's maybe a little debate at the center forward position. How important are the Aronsons? Like, is there anyone that comes to your mind that you say changes the reality of this tournament?
Brandon Vasquez, just because attackers have a bigger impact, particularly off the bench. But again, like I'm a big Brandon Vasquez guy. I wouldn't have complained if he was on the team, but like I don't think it was egregious. And maybe that's just part of me. Like, I don't have a lot of juice for arguing about 24, 25, 26 slots on a roster. Like, how many of them didn't play at this tournament? Haji Wright got, 7 minutes or whatever the hell it was. Like, yeah, maybe, but like,
I don't think
again,
Luca Della Torre played in this tournament, and center mid's one where you could debate a couple people in a couple spots. And
but like, was he really gonna, or like, was Tanner Tessman gonna start over these guys? Like,
Right.
again, these are talking points and they're fun to argue about, but like, I don't think it matters. What matters is the top end of this team.
Vasquez also has played over 60 minutes. He played over 60 minutes once in his last 6 games of the season in Liga MX, and then obviously the season's not in right now, so technically not in form coming into this tournament. I think that's a good name, though. It's a different element. It's a different style, and part of the problem with some of this was like you leaned on Josh Sargent, and he clearly wasn't fit to play in this tournament, which is kind of one of the ways you have to judge these things. But it's probably doesn't change the reality, and it probably doesn't matter at all. Timothy Weah gets a red card, unfortunately, early against Panama. The U.S. goes up 1-0 3 minutes after that. Then they are tied 3 minutes and 36 seconds after that. And that sealed a lot of the U.S.'s fate, although today the result went their way. Panama winning only 3-1. It put the U.S. in a situation where if they won, they would have been through. They fail to score. They lose 1-0 against Uruguay. And that's kind of the end of things for this U.S. team. We got the Brian White shouts for the New Jersey Mario Gomez today on the.
That's what I was saying yes to. I was very happy about.
Today on the recap show, first I called him Miroslav White, and then I called him Brian Drogba. When you score goals the way he does, I think the New Jersey Mario Gomez is like disrespectful to him at this
Screw
point.
you! I came out. I've been. That's been my mission to make that a thing. But I do Miroslav White. I don't know. That hit me. I love that too.
Yeah, because it is the most absurd name, and it's also like kind of a perfect comp for them. And then we're getting a list of names for all the kids. Esmir Baraktarovic, all these kids. They're all really good at soccer. A lot of them are going to be really good pros. Some of them are going to be great national team players. None of them are going to affect this right now. The U.S. is out of Copa America alongside Mexico and Jamaica, 3 teams that thought they could do something special for Mexico and the U.S. This is the last warm-up to the World Cup. There is no world in which the U.S. goes into the World Cup where we can say we know what we're going to get. That's the reality now. This was your one shot in a competitive tournament in this environment, in this structure, in this country where you are going to play in 2026, where you would have a chance to beat Uruguay, knock off a Brazil or Colombia, go to a semifinal, be on the big stage, perform at that level, and be able to say to your fan base and be able to say to the wider fan base, believe in us and pay attention to us in 2026 because we can do this. They can still do it, but they have no proof going into it. So you are at this point going to have to convince everyone live at that tournament because you've got no cachet going in. And I think that is a lot of what was lost over the course of this week.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. Like, it's 100%. Like that's what I keep going back to with just the macro view of this, and that's the most important takeaway from this game, from this tournament, from this experience. All that they can still do it. This is not that doom and gloom. I don't think that the player pool is like broken. Again, I just think that we need to reconfigure expectations and also reconfigure playing to their strengths.
And it'll be interesting now over the next 2 years to see the Aiden Morrises of the world who are a little bit older, but get their first shot in Europe or get their first shot being the leaders of a team in MLS, right? Maybe Georgi Mihailovic and Cole Bassett, guys like that. If they can slide into the pool rather than grow into it from a young age and maybe reinforce things as they go forward. But I think for the most part, we feel pretty good, Tom. We're done.
Yes, I was about to text you and say I think it's time to wrap.
People in the chat don't say so, but also they're all trolling us. So I appreciate that as well. We've got questions about the Maldives national team. That's where I went on my honeymoon a few weeks ago. Shout out to Ludacris on that one. A lot of stuff's about burgers.
Ludacris.
I don't know what's going on with burgers. I don't know where that came from. Or
somebody called the United States a burger team, and a lot of people enjoyed that.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I enjoyed it as well. Well, if you enjoy being a part of this live, we're back 2 p.m. Eastern time coming up today. As I said, a ton to talk about. If you're listening to it later on the podcast, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being around with us. It wasn't fun, to say the least, but it was an experience, and I'm glad we could all be in it together. I hope you enjoyed our coverage of this Copa America on the U.S. side. I might have to fire up the Canadian postgame show again like I did last week for the Peru game for this knockout game, because Canada against Venezuela, they've got a legitimate shot. Also, to throw out the whole international soccer thing, Canada scored 1 goal in the group stage, and they are through to play Venezuela in a quarterfinal. The U.S. scored 3 goals, and they are out. Mexico only, technically lost 1 game, 1-0, and they are out as well. So it is tight. The margins are tight. The opportunities are tight, but it was a big one for the U.S. I said it on the last show. I thought that this was a chance to change the perception of the sport and move the sport forward, and especially this national team. And that did not happen. And you don't get shots at that every 2 years. You get shots at that once in a generation. And this may have been the one. Lucky for them, they have 2026 coming around, but the 2-year buildup would have been wild. And it will have to be a little bit different now. Going forward, we, of course, will cover all of it on Soccer Wise. We've got live shows. We've got podcasts. We have going to start working on some longer scripted series things. I've got some ideas popping around about some stuff I really want to dig into and dive into, especially around, of course, youth development and the structure of the game in this country and in other countries and what we can learn and all of that. So I will see Tom very, very soon at 2 p.m. this afternoon, Tuesday afternoon. Thank you to all of you again for listening. Thank you to all of you in the comment section for being here with us. We always appreciate it. We love what we're doing so far. You've been listening to Soccer Wise live post-game show here for the USMNT. Hope you enjoyed it as much as you could, and we'll talk to you again very, very soon.